What's up, everybody? It's Izzy. In this video, I want to make a case for doing the minimum effective dose of volume. Now, this is not something that I generally do, but I think in today's climate, powerlifting climate that is, or just the way that the community handles programming, it's kind of a more volume all the time. More volume is always better. Do as much volume as you can, and that's how you're going to maximize your results. However, I think one of the things that often gets overlooked when suggesting that people do tons and tons of volume is that it comes with a host of side effects. Some of them are good and some of them are bad, right? So the intensity that you train at, and I'm talking about percentage of 1RM, will determine the specific type of adaptation that you get from the training. So if you do sets at 30% of 1RM versus 60% of 1RM versus 90% of 1RM, you're going to get different effects. Now, all these effects exist on a spectrum, and even doing work at 90% will result in some endurance. But the bottom line is that you primarily influence the type of adaptation you want with your intensity. However, the magnitude of the adaptation, that means like the size of the adaptation, is almost solely down to the volume of the training. So it's similar to, like, let's say you wanted to get a tan. The stimulus is going to be in the sun or be in a tanning bed or whatever, but the amount of tan that you get from the session would depend on how much exposure you got to the sun. It's very similar with your training volume. And so when people realize this, that, more volume means more muscle growth, more strength, it kind of became just slam everybody with as much volume as possible to make gains as quickly as possible. And this does work to a point. However, there's some really serious issues with always using this approach, and it primarily comes down to injury rates and burnout. So whether, and burnout to me is somewhat of like a, it is a malady. It's just a psychological malady, but it can disrupt your training just as much as an injury. If you completely lose motivation for the sport after only doing it for a few years because you've ground yourself into dust running Smolov for all 3 lifts at the same time consecutively, it's and that's an extreme example, but my point really is that burnout is a very serious issue, and there's quite a few powerlifters, especially if you look at like the juniors, who do really well and then just disappear, and we never hear from them ever again. And part of this, in my opinion, it's not just like, they got older and gave up on the sport. Part of it is burnout, and it's just when most younger lifters train so hard and so frequently in order to get as good as they can, as quickly as they can, they're always in a rush, that it ends up taking a massive toll. And here is the case, basically, for using the minimum effective dose, and it's really simple. If you can make progress more quickly with more volume, but the problem comes into play is how much time are you going to lose on the back end due to burnout or getting hurt. Like, you can make a ton of progress in 6 months, but then if you tear something or you have a really bad case of tendonitis that develops that just doesn't go away, is it really worth it? Because now you might have to take 3, 4, 5, 6 months to fix that problem, and you're not getting any productive training during that time period. So even though you won't make progress as fast with a lower dose of volume, with the quote-unquote minimum effective dose of volume, you can, of course, minimize injury risk and burnout risks, which are very, very real, especially for newer lifters, and injury risks is, of course, very real for everybody. But so I think what this really points to is that there is definitely going to be an optimal, and everyone hates and loves that word, but there's an optimal amount of volume, and it's generally not going to be the absolute most that you can recover from for most people, because for most people the absolute most they can recover from is not going to leave enough recovery resources to make the quickest progress possible, and it's also going to lead to much higher rates of injury and burnout, which in the long run will actually slow your progress down more than if you had taken a slow, steady approach to the volume equation and, simply made reasonable gains every single cycle. However, a lot of us That's not how we're programmed. That's not how we're wired as competitors. It's more, more, more. You know, more is always better. I have way more competitors that I work with who are concerned about not doing enough. In fact, almost all of them, versus people who ask me to reduce the amount of training that I'm giving them. It's almost always asking for more. And the point of this video is that I really wanted to get across is that for your own good, for your own sustainability in the sport, especially if you want to do this into your 30s or even into your 40s, or if you want to keep lifting until you're 50 or 60 years old, you don't want to accrue a ton of injuries along the way, because that's going to make it extremely difficult to keep doing what you love to do. And the more injuries you have, the less likely it is you'll be able to do what you love to do as you age. And in that regard, I think that there is a very real consideration that needs to be made as far as the injury risk when you take the all the volume, all the time approach. And, for the most part, I think that in the current state of powerlifting, it's swung a little bit too far in that direction, especially, like in the IPF and the USAPL, where people just, the standards are getting so high, and to be competitive requires so much that I think people are doing just too much. And, it's just like every other sport. Elite athletes end up overtrained, and it's only hurting them. But anyway, I'm getting to be a bit rambly here. I'm just rambling on. So the main point that I really wanted to make is that you might be able to make quicker progress for a short period of time by doing tons and tons of volume and just grinding yourself into dust. But you really have to consider whether the psychological cost of doing that is going to be worth it. And further, you have to admit and accept that you are definitely increasing the rate at which you can get injured. The rate of injury will increase the more that you train, and the more and more that you toe that line of overreaching and overtraining, the higher and higher the injury risk gets. Anyways, that's all I have to say on this topic, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. As always, my friends, enjoy your training. Good luck with it, and have a nice day. Peace.